And you said you have a house there?
Yeah, we have a lodge there. It's not a big one, it's a couple of bedrooms, but it sits right on the Olifants River, which is the Elephant River, and it's just inside the Kruger Park, northeast corner of South Africa, full of crocodiles, so there's no swimming allowed. And the animals come literally to our window. They look in, so you've got to be a bit careful. But we've been there 20 years, and we haven't been eaten yet.
Well, that's good. No spiders this year?
Thankfully not, because although there's no scar now, there's a sensation down by my ankle where the spider got tucked in over a year ago now. And apparently that's what happens with a cytotoxic bite. It can stay in your blood forever and you get the feeling, but fortunately, no more pain or scar.
Good. Well, we're glad you're doing well. And like I said, we're excited to get into it with you. So we will get rocking and rolling here. Ladies and gentlemen, howdy and aloha. Welcome to another episode of Airey Bros Radio. We are here, you are there, and we appreciate you tuning in. This morning, we are diving into the 2025 Tour de France with none other than the voice of cycling himself, Phil Liggett. But before we get rolling, you all know the drill. Make sure you smash that like button and you are subscribed to Airey Bros Radio on YouTube. Drop a comment, every review, and share helps us grow and give back to the sports we love. Follow us on Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. This episode, as always, is fueled by Black Sheep Endurance for all your coaching and nutrition, for all your endurance and coaching nutrition needs. Let's not forget why we're here, ladies and gentlemen. We're here to shine a light on the coaches, athlete mentors, and community leaders that we wish we had growing up. If you're chasing endurance, community, or purpose, this one is for you. As I mentioned, our guest this morning is Phil Liggett, the voice of cycling, legendary cycling commentator with over 50 years of Tour de France coverage, starting in 1973, the longtime voice of NBC, ITV, and SBS, covering the Olympics, World Championships, and the sport's biggest moments. He is an author, a journalist, a former international cyclist, bringing rich storytelling and deep insight to the mic, honored as a member of the Order of the British Empire for his contributions to cycling and broadcasting. Without further ado, it is an honor and a pleasure, and we do greatly appreciate your time this morning or this afternoon for you. Phil, welcome back. How are you, sir?
I'm feeling great, Rich. I've just had a wonderful time in our second life, which is South Africa, and helping people and animals survive there. Come back nicely refreshed. These days, of course, I've got all you need to watch all the cycle racing while I'm away in South Africa. In the old days, I didn't know what had gone on by the time I'd come back. But now you've got Wi-Fi, you can't go wrong. Yeah, so I'm home now. I've been home 2 weeks, facing a forest in the garden. So I'm crashing through that in the mornings, and in the afternoon, quite honestly, I'm swatting the Tour de France because, even wherever I am in the world, I spend an hour and a half every day, usually when I get up, seeing what's happened overnight in the world of cycling, so that when I do come to the commentary box, hopefully I'm ready, as the cyclists hope their form is ready.
And how long were you in Africa for?
Went there this time for 5 weeks. Okay. It's too busy a time, the early months of the classics and stuff. So just for 5 weeks, and we go back October through November, maybe head up and stay for Christmas or come home a bit early.
Okay.
Phil, you mentioned during this time you take an hour a day to get ready, to keep your brain sharp on the knowledge of what's going on in the tour, just like the cyclers have to come to the line prepared. Rich and I were talking yesterday as we were prepping for this podcast, and you're constantly traveling the whole Tour de France every day. You got to do your job, and then the next day you're moving to the next stage. Do you have to prepare your body physically for that kind of workload?
Well, I don't do it specifically for the tour, because my first tour was back in 1973 and I was a driver. That's how I got the job, to a British television commentator who was on duty, of course. And I sat by him. I guess I picked up a few tips. I was not looking to take his job, that's for sure. And so for 4 years, I was just a driver. I did a bit of freelance journalism, but it was a great way to learn the Tour de France. And believe me, driving at the front of the tour, because in those days, with just the race radio from the organizers, no mobile telephones and stuff, you were literally chased by the peloton. And I've had English journalists on the first Tour de France crying in the back seat of the car because the riders were 300 or 400 meters behind us as we're going down hills at a crazy speed. Thankfully, those days are gone. I used to go to bed on those tours and tick off the cols, which I descended, thinking, well, I'm still alive. And that's no word of a lie. I mean, I came down the Puy de Dôme one year, early on. It was in the mid to late 70s. And a gendarme jumped out in front of me, blowing his whistle with his hand up as I was running off the mountain. And I just yelled, get out of the way. I can't stop. I have no brakes. And the brakes had literally gone. I went into the casino at the finish line and parked the car. And I honestly thought the car next to me had been used as a junk heap and just thrown away. It was actually a tour car that was completely written off, having had a similar problem. So those days I don't miss. I think age cures that problem. And now I really enjoy the Tour de France for what it is. Now, actually, despite the fact, I think this is my 52nd. At old age, you forget, you know. And so the 52nd tour, I don't have the same itch like I had for my first one, because that was an adventure, continued through the second one. And I remember after the second one, going to my wife when I got home, Trish, and said, hey, you won't believe it. There's some old gets over there who have been on the tour for 40 years. That's never going to be the case with me. Of course, now I've done 52. But there we are. I still enjoy it. The people still enjoy me. I'm delighted to say I'm in the control of my fans. If they tell me en masse to get off, of course, one or two do. But if they tell me en masse, I'm out. And NBC, bless them, they don't want me to go. I've tried a few times to say, do you think I should go away? And they've said, no, we want you. And the crowd love you. And I'm delighted to say I've had lots of letters asking if I was on the tour this year. So I'm in a good place at the moment, yeah.
Do you get solid sleep during that time?
I do sleep pretty well. You know, the days now, in those early days, I was a driver. So basically, I'd write a freelance story at the end for an hour, and then my job was done. So I was finished work by about 6 or 7 o'clock, go to the hotel, meet all the guys, have a good life. The life that the writers think the journalists always have, you know, after the tour crosses the line. But that changed. First of all, I went live on every day on British television back in the early 80s. Then I invited Paul Sherwin, who was about to retire, if he'd like to come alongside me. He did. And as you know, he died in 2018. But to that point, we'd worked together for 33 years. We were quite a team. And then after that happened, what changed was American TV took a big interest. First with CBS and ESPN came in, and then OLN, and then Versus, and so it went on until Comcast and NBC Sports got the reins, and they've made a great job of it, I might add. But now, because of the extra work involved, and I only work now for NBC and Peacock, of course, they're on the platforms, I just go to the finish line. So the downside is I never speak to a rider in the Tour de France, and the moment we leave the start, we get to Paris. I've had one or two say to me, rather sarcastically, shouting over the barriers, hey, have you been on all the tour? I say, yes, you know I have, just haven't seen you. And because we have reporters to do that job, they're at the start line every day, we're always at the finish. So the routine of a day is we get up about 6:30, we go down to the start line, finish line rather, for around 8:30, seek out a coffee and a croissant, and then we start meetings, planning the day, because we go on air, depending on the stage, between 10 and 11 o'clock local time, or 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock local time, depending on the length of the stage. But the organizers always set the stage finish nearest the same time every day that they can, which is circa 5 o'clock in France. And so we have the meetings, we do our little scripts, we plan our campaign, and then we go to our desk. That's myself and Bob Rowe. And Bob Rowe scribbles away for hours. I don't know what he does with his little paperwork, but he scribbled away for hours. And that's after I've dropped him off on the way to the finish line, because we usually have a hotel within 20 kilometers, 12 miles of where the finish is. And Bob says, hey, let me out, gets his bike out. He goes up the last climb of the day, and then he comes in, sometimes in a panic. He's running it close to going on air, but he's always succeeded. And then we just do the job. The riders cross the line. Okay, where are we staying tonight? Out to the car. These days, they give us a driver, Bob and I, so we just have to go to the car and get in. No more driving. and we just talk about the day's racing, talk about the plans tomorrow. Hotel can be anywhere between 8 and 10 o'clock at night because of the distance, and we still haven't eaten. It's a routine you fall into. Really, everything you want to do, you get done. You never feel tired for the 3 weeks because you're so charged to get through the day. And the days, the months fly by. I once told a British producer when he was on his first Tour de France, every time he saw a personality, he would say to me, Phil, you've got to get out there now. Get that interview now. And I used to say to him, I said, Rod, listen, it's Sunday today. 4 Sundays from now, you'll still be doing the same job. So don't try to get everybody interviewed at the start of day one, because you won't get to the finish. And after 4 days, he literally fell asleep in front of his meal. So I took his wallet out. I paid the bill, put the receipt back in his pocket so he could claim it back. And then that was it. Next morning, he went berserk when I told him he'd paid the bill. First question was, did you get the receipt? I said, yeah, you're okay. You'll get your money back. But I told you not to rush around at everybody you see. The stories will come out pretty naturally once the race gets underway. So, yeah, the answer to the question is, no, I don't get tired. But boy, the day after, try and wake me up because the adrenaline has stopped and I am completely flat. And but that's the way it should be. And I hope it stays that way for a few more years.
Phil, do you get a little bit of a vacation? Do you stay in France or do you head right back home after the tour?
No, we come straight back home.
Yeah.
I've never been one for staying on. I go out 3 days before the tour starts and acclimatize because there's always a lot of things to sort out, to get your badges, to see what people's ideas are, to meet the organization. Many of the organization after all this time are friends. And we talk a lot, and I get good stories from the organization before the race starts. Then once the race rolls, it's the routine I've mentioned, and I'm on the 8 o'clock train or flight next morning from wherever I am to get home, and that's it.
Sleep in your own bed.
Normally it's on the Champs-Élysées because the big birthday for the finishes on the Champs-Élysées this year, 50 years of finishing on the Champs-Élysées. I remember the very first one, and I've commentated on every one of those 50 years on the Champs-Élysées. And I remember that in 75, it was a wonderful race. And at last, Bernard Thévenet gave France a victory because they're getting a bit desperate. Now we're still getting desperate now because we haven't won, or we, French, haven't won the race since 85 now with Bernard Hinault. But in 75, it was a curious race because obviously Eddy Merckx was the man. And Eddy Merckx was without doubt the best and had never lost a Tour de France he'd started in. And so he'd won 5. And during the race, he crashed pretty early on. A silly crash on the Col de Telegraph, which at that time was in the neutralized section of the race, heading towards the Galibier. And we heard the radio call, because in those days I was riding just in front of the race. I had a radio in the car, and it comes on, Eddy Merckx has crashed. We thought, what? He's still neutralized. Then we heard, after about 10 minutes, the doctor, Port, announced that he's wiping the hands of the rider Eddy Merckx because his advice, he's hit his head, should stop the race. He has refused to abandon. So we want no medical responsibility for Eddy Merckx. And the race starts. Well, they were racing to Morzine. And on those days, the press room was in the bottom of Morzine, Avoriaz, in Morzine itself. The riders went up to Morzine, Avoriaz at the top, and they go past the press room as they start the climb. There was a break on. Of course, Eddy was in it. So too was Bernard Thévenet and a few other great climbers. And I saw Eddy go past, and his face was all white and marked just under his eye on the left-hand side. So he really had hit his, in effect, he'd fractured his head because the bone was gone just under the eye. And so he was suffering, but he got up there, didn't win the stage. From memory, I think it was a Spanish rider went up there. Could have been Jimenez. Anyway, every day from that day on, the Belgian television followed Merckx, of course. And the Belgian journalist used to come to the finishing line every day. And in those days, we didn't have plush commentary boxes like perhaps we do now. At least NBC does look after me. I've got a great commentary box. But Merckx used to come up and then grab hold of the scaffolding, which was our commentary, and shake. Visibly, he was shaking. we all felt like we were on a roller coaster because he's a big man. And then all the journalists around him like flies saying, Eddie, are you giving up? Eddie, are you abandoned? And Eddie would look at them and say, no, I'm not giving up. I will finish the tour. But you really could be quite badly injured. Okay, he said, but I'm finishing the tour. And the reason, because if he was to lose the tour to a Frenchman like Thévenet, the reason was Thévenet would have been a poor winner of the tour because Merckx abandoned. And, you know, the French didn't like Eddy Merckx. But the headlines the day after he lost the tour, when that first year on the Champs-Élysées, then headlines next day was Vive Eddy Merckx. And he became an instant favorite of the French public, all because of what he did as a sportsman, and that was finish the tour. Just to tell you about that tour on that last day very briefly, the French commentators were always scruffy. They wore jeans, you know, whereas we wore our NBC in those days, CBS jackets, and we looked very smart with our tie on. Very British. But the French looked really rubbish, really. But the day we finished on the Champs-Élysées with the President of France attending, they all wore suits and ties. So when they cut down to Jean Lelio, who was the commentator, down on the finishing line, I couldn't believe it was Jean. He looked fantastic. And I was listening to his commentary, which of course was in French because he was talking to, we weren't on air at the time. And he said, Eddie, you're losing your first Tour de France. Eddie goes, it's not finished. Yes, but you can't bridge 2 minutes on Bernard on the flat stages here on the Champs-Élysées. He said, I will attack as soon as the race starts. And Thévenet went bright red. He thought, what the hell are you talking about? So the race started. Eddie shot out the gate like a scalded cat. Thévenet got on his back wheel, and for one complete lap of the Champs-Élysées, that's about 4 miles. You climb up the Haute Champs towards the Arc de Triomphe, come down the other side at 60 kilometers an hour, 40 miles an hour, round the back through the finishing line. And when he got through the finishing line, Eddie sat up, looked at Bernard and said, go forward. Now you've won your first Tour de France. And that made him such a star. He was as good a loser as he was a winner. And of course, 2 years later, Thévenet won again. So that made Thévenet a star. And you may have noticed, if you've been watching the recent Dauphiné, Bernard Thévenet, who's been on the podium at the finishing lines because he lives in the region. Yeah.
So looking at the course, Phil, looks like we're starting in north of France this year.
Yeah, well, it makes a change from somewhere else, I suppose. We've got, let's see, we've 26 times we've started offshore of France. This year we go even one better. We don't go out the country at all. We don't even tickle the country. Sometimes to get around the courses, we might need to nip into Spain, but the race route doesn't leave France all the way. That's very typical of the organization. They're very conscious of their French public. Yes, they go for the money, let's face it. And, you know, in 2 years' time, it's starting in Britain, and we'll race through the 3 countries making up the UK, which is Scotland, Wales, and indeed England. Not Northern Ireland, that's too logistically difficult. So, you know, it's made it very difficult for me to retire. It would be good to retire on British soil, I suppose. That's another story. But I think the French have done a great course. It's a bit like, if you look at the route itself, a bit like a load of worms crawling all around the continent, because just little black squiggles and quite a lot of driving between the stages to actually stay in touch with the race. So that's, I mean, a tough job for us, the journalists, because we drive the same route ahead of them the night before. Some of those transfers are going to mean no dinner at night, I would think. But it starts up in the north of France, and because of the history there, with both the Americans and the British helping save the French and, of course, win World War II, there'll be big celebrations there for VE Day celebration. They've done it already. And for that reason, too, that part of France simply loves the Americans and the British. And so it'll be a great start. And I hope the Americans do pretty well on that occasion, too, because Omaha Beach and Gold Beach and all the Normandy landings, we're all around the area. It's going to be very, very special. Then off we go down the side, down underneath Cherbourg and out towards Brittany, race it down from Brittany, hotbed of cycling, cut across the middle. Then we race down to the area of the Puy de Dôme, although we don't climb the Puy de Dôme, but they've got another present waiting for the riders down there. Then we plunge slowly down with a big move down to the Alps. No, sorry, the Pyrenees. And then we come round up through the Alps, and eventually we return up to the Champs-Élysées in Paris via Montpellier in the bottom end of the Pyrenees there, or top end, I suppose you call it, of the Alps, sorry. Getting my mountains mixed up. But it's a good course. It's going to be a tough course. They've got 7 hilltop finishes, hill to mountaintop finishes. The sprinters have also got a nice allowance of stages. And they'll try to chase Mark Cavendish's record now after he won last year to beat Eddie Merckx's record. So he's got 35 stage wins. There's some good sprinters on the initial list because there's no riders declared the colours yet, but there's plenty of lists out. And Jonathan Milan and a few other top sprinters are definitely already on that list. But we'll see who turns up on the day. I think it's obviously everything's a course for Pogačar. The guy's on fire. He's doing all Eddie Merckx feats time and time again. He got 2 stage wins in the Dauphiné wearing the maillot jaune of the Dauphiné. And so, and he's only the 2nd world champion to win as current world champion. And he would probably be only the 2nd world champion to do it if he got the Tour double. Because, you know, there's only something like, 10 riders that have won the Dauphiné and in the Tour de France in the same year. But those names are the best in the world. There's been no fluke double victory in the Dauphiné. You've had Lucien Beaubret was the first guy, won the Tour 3 years straight. And then you've got Jacques Anquetil, the brilliant Frenchman, got 5 tours. Eddie Merckx, 5 tours. You've got O'Connor, Bernard Thévenet in the year he finally beat Merckx. He also won the Dauphiné. Eno won it twice in a row. And so it goes on, Indurain. And then we had an incredible list of British winners, starting with Bradley Wiggins, followed by Chris Froome and Geraint Thomas. And so we managed to break into the scene a little bit. But I think it's a good omen, Pogačar winning that. I think he'll become the 2nd world champion wearing the jersey to win the Tour as well. Can't see him being challenged, but I do love the heart and soul of Jonas Vingegaard, the way he really is not afraid to go with Pogačar. And we saw in the Dauphiné, Pogačar admires Jonas so much and always searches for him at the finishing line to shake his hands. They're friends, but once they pin the number on and the race starts, they're devout enemies. So I love those two together. And this guy Lipovic, who got 3rd in the Dauphiné, Florian, that performance, it hasn't been announced to my knowledge as we speak to you, but he's got to be in the Tour de France now. He's a kid, former junior world time trial champion. He's a kid. He's barely out of being a junior, and here he is now, another Pogačar on the move as well. And a lot of the other big likely winners, well, the handicap to be on the same teams as Vingegaard or Pogačar. Almeida, for example, 4th last year. He's going to have to work hard, or things go radically wrong in his team to be able to ride for himself. He's got to race for Pogačar. And people like Sepp Kuss, they're handicapped as well, and Jorgensen. Great American riders in their own rights, as we know, with Sepp having won the Vuelta. But their job really will be to help the leaders win the Tour de France. And that's what it's all about. Professional cycling often goes that way. You get the odd double cross in Formula One motor racing, but it's a long, long time. I can't even recall a situation where teammates have double crossed the leader. So there'll be that to come as well. I'm looking for a great race. Look, everybody says to me, how long have you been on the Tour de France? And this was years ago. Why do you keep going back to what's the same event every year for? Why don't you do something else? So because you never see the same race twice. And you never see the same race twice. It's you just got to see it, realize and hope you recognize the talent, the type of tactics they're employing. And Dauphiné was full of great tactics this year. Team leaders sending their domestiques in breakaways, joining them. Wout van Aert was a typical example, getting up and then riding for the win. And Wout will be back, of course, in the Tour this year. That guy, if you're talking about a true sportsman and a great talent, for me, Wout van Aert is probably my favorite. He's just such a nice person, and he's known everything. He's known all the glories. He's known all the bad crashes, and he's still very, very loved by his public.
And there's two time trials. They come relatively earlier on the front half of the race this year, and we also, I believe, we go Mont Ventoux this year as well. Correct or no?
No, it's correct.
Yes.
It'll be the 19th time we've climbed Mont Ventoux. And if you remember, that was the situation with Chris Froome a couple of years ago, when he continued to run after the crowd blocked the road and he fell off and all that. And he was running up the mountain with his yellow jersey on, unbelievable sight, because they had to move the finish very quickly from the top of Ventoux because of the raging winds down to Chalet Reynard, which is about 3 miles lower down the mountain and sheltered. But all the crowd moved as well, and they all came down. And there was thousands of them, because that's where everybody wants to go, at the top. So now they want to get down halfway up to see the finish. And there was just no room for the riders to come through, and there was a collision, and motorbikes were involved. Not a massive collision, going too slowly, but it stopped everything. And Froome had to jump off his bike. His bike was damaged, and he started to run. But I want to know what the judges would have done if he'd have crossed that finishing line without his bike, because that is absolutely against the rules. They would have had to disqualify him from the Tour in the yellow jersey. Fortunately, somebody got him a bike and he carried on running, and all was well and good at the end. But I did say in my commentary of the day, Chris Froome might well find himself disqualified if he doesn't get himself a bike pretty soon. But we'll never know the answer to that one. Be a brave judge, mind you, that pull that one. You bet your life it would be. Yeah, so the Ventoux's in, and I can't. It's stage. I think it's stage 16. Which means there's still a way to go. No, it's not stage 16. Let's have a look. You've got the Carcassonne. No, yeah, it is stage 16. I should trust my memory, shouldn't I? It is stage 16. And then you've got a little time trial, slightly mountainous before the end. But, the time trials, they're nothing. It's a short team time trial, which comes very early on at Caen, up in the north. And the rules have changed now. This used to be taken on I can't remember, on the 3rd or the 5th rider to finish. I think it was the 5th rider to finish of the 8-man team. So you can shed 3 weak riders and let them go for their own time. But your 5th man is your man you've got to keep in the group, because that's where the watch stops, on the 5th man. But now what happens is the rules this year will be every rider in the team races for his own time. And then the top 3 riders' times will be added together to give them the winners and also the team prize allocation. So that means a strong time trialist can just fly down the road, get the best time of the whole day maybe. And then if we've got another 2 guys come in maybe a minute or so behind him, and you add the 3 up, has he won the race, or has that team won the race? So it'll be, I think it's a very exciting concept. For me, it's fair, because I've been an advocate against the team time trial. Not that I love the event, and I've had some wonderful commentaries on the team time trial, but it's very unfair that the time of the 5th rider and the team affects the individual classification. Because is it an individual race or is it a team race? Now I think the organisers have admitted it's an individual race. So yes, the first 3 riders have to race for a time, but the top man has got to prove he can ride a time trial fast as well, and hope it all works out. Because that time, if he gets the best time in the time trial, goes individually to his overall situation. So that'll be fun to commentate on. I hope everybody gets it right, not least me, as we call that one. That's up in the north. It's in a lovely area of France, in Caen, and that's right in the north of all the action, very early on, before we cross over into Normandy. Normandy is not a flat department. It's very hilly, and down into Brittany also, Brittany and Normandy. Yeah.
Phil, you just said that the organizers have decided and made pretty clear that it's an individual race and not a team race. But we all know that the teams help the individuals get across the line and get to the top of that podium. What are the top teams that we need to keep an eye out on, and what jerseys are we going to see the most this year?
Well, I love the way Visma ride, because they operate on team tactics, and they've got great tacticians on the team, and that's going to be, I think, the only way that Vingegaard can get another victory, is because he's got to have the help of his team. We've got to keep him away from whatever the tactics are of Pogačar. Pogačar was okay, happy with his team in the Dauphiné, but he was always exposed towards the end And that's because he's the best. His team can't go with him at the end, but then neither can anybody else, as we saw, as he demonstrated in the climbs. So his tactics perhaps don't need to be quite as important as they do with Vingegaard, where people like Jurgensen are going to have to get up the road and possibly wait for Jonas to ride. And when they join, and Van Aert as well, when they join, then they're going to have to pace Jurgensen, hopefully away from Pogačar. There's a lot of cards they've got to play, and they know it, and they're a solid unit. And Bora have had a horrible year. They strengthened the team this year. Frankly, they've had a terrible year. They had an awful Spring Classic season, which they were aiming at having a great one. Didn't happen. But now, at the right time, Florian Lipowitz, the new German youngster, has really hit the high time. Third in the Dauphiné. He was a little bit slow to react to the attacks, but he got back. And he's a very mature young man. And I think now he's done that ride, he'll come to he wasn't going to be selected, is the story I have. But the story I have now is that they will name him shortly as being part of the Tour team. I really hope they do. He's an exciting rider, just like looking at a young Pogačar. Here we go again. When Pogačar appeared on the scene to knock poor old Roglic off the possibility of winning the first year that they met. Now we're going to see Roglic, by the way. He'll be back. All the stars will be there. Evenepoel, third last year in the white. First guy to wear the white jersey, for goodness knows, 5 years, because Pogačar wins it every time he rode until last year. But he didn't qualify last year, so Evenepoel got that. I think Remco he's learned a lot. He wasn't on his top form, but the Dauphiné will show well. So I think we'll see plenty of attempts to flip the coup in the Tour for Remco. He's a good time trials. On the other side, though, the time trials very short. You've got that short team time trial, which is only about 20 odd kilometers, 15 miles maybe. And then you've got a mountain time trial. I'm just going to check my notes here, which is nothing. Yeah, 11 kilometers below. It's a hilly time trial. So that's all we've got. We've only got about 22 miles of time trialing this year. Wow. So that's not going to favor Remco. And it's also a tough one. Team time trial. And a mountain time trial up to the top. I think it's Perigud where they got, or Perisur or something. Yeah. Perigud.
So you've made it pretty clear that Pogačar is clear top guy. Is Jonas and Remco, are they racing for number 2, or is there any chance that they can get on top of the podium?
Look, I'd love to think they're not. I think everybody in the Tour is racing for number 2 at the moment if his form continues. He won't race again until the Tour de France. Neither will Jonas. Don't know about Remco. You might want to see how he's going. He's more that way inclined, so he might pop up somewhere. But what we're going to see is that the racing this year has been simply fantastic. Even though whenever he's raced, he's won. Pogačar is a very exciting rider. You remember when he won his world title last year? It was 101 kilometers or something. He was alone in the lead. He only attacked to see how it went, and then he was on his own. He thought, God, I've no choice now. I'm 100 kilometers from the finish. He really thought he made a mistake, but he won brilliantly. So whenever he attacks, those that want to win the Tour must go with him at whatever stage of the Tour it is. And he'll always test them. That's what he does. But he has a good team, of course. He has Almeida on his team. He has others big riders on his team. But when he's showing his true form, he doesn't need a team. That's the way it appears to me. And don't forget, this will be the 5th year, the same 2 riders have dominated the Tour de France. So it's either going to be Jonas Vingegaard wins or Tadej Pogačar. The score is 3-2 at the moment to Tadej. But it could be equalised, you never know. What I really, and I said it earlier, what I really love about Jonas Vingegaard, he's got a huge heart. And he will give everything and leave it on the road. He will, and he believes in himself. It was about 2 days from the end last year when he admitted in public, I can't win this year's Tour de France. So I bet he went home and said, I think he'll win it next year. And he's trained pretty well. He's pretty pleased with his form. He's not up the same level as Pogačar, but that's a good thing. They always say you go to the Tour de France just below. So as the race progresses, you ride in to the condition you want to win the race. And somebody else who might be doing the same thing is Remco Evenepoel. That's how he will arrive at the Tour too, I think. Another name to conjure is Mathieu van der Poel. Always call him by his dad's name, but he seems to like it. Mathieu van der Poel, he had a lovely tour. He tried. He's a lovely attacking rider. Always gave it a go, just in case it worked out. It almost did on a couple of occasions. He smelt the points jersey for a few days and didn't win it. I love his riding style, and I know Airey pretty well. I haven't seen him for a few years, except on telly. But Airey was so proud of what Mathieu is doing, and he's an exciting rider. And of course, he's partly French, isn't he? Because he's married to a French lady, and the granddaughter of the late, sadly, Raymond Poulidor, who never won the race, but I lost count of the times he was finished second and third, usually behind Jacques Anquetil. Yeah, so I'm excited about the race, no question about it. And it's a lovely route. I hope the weather's not too bad, because there's some treacherous stages. The Queen stage, it's got to be the Col de Loze, which comes near the end, stage 18, the Col de Loze. It's also the high spot of the Tour. It's about 200 meters higher, the Col, and it finishes on the top than the Col de Tourmalet. The Col de Tourmalet is 2,116 or 19 meters high, and this is 2,320, if I remember rightly. And that's a tough climb, to say the least. It's only been used as a mountaintop finish once before. Miguel Martinez. Angel Miguel Martinez won. That's right. Spanish guy, pure climber. The other time I went over the top, it was then a race to the finish, and that was Felix Gull, who was up that time a couple of years ago. It's a terrible climb. That's got to be the Queen stage. There's something like 19,000 feet of climbing on that stage 18. I can just see Pogačar rubbing his hands in glee.
How far is that stage, distance-wise?
I don't know. I remember, look.
Curious.
It's I mean, was that stage 18? Did I say? Yeah.
Yeah.
It goes to Périgueux. Oh no, that's the wrong stage. Hold on. Well, it is stage 18. I don't think I've got the right. Oh, yeah. It looks to be around about 170, 180, between 170 and 180 kilometers. Okay. So it's just over 100 miles.
Yeah, that's
so, and that makes it harder.
Yeah.
The shorter the stage, the faster they will go, and the more time they can gain. When I used to organize the Tour of Britain milk race for 22 years, I plotted the route. And used to get the usual complaint that I plotted the route for British riders to win. Well, if I did, I didn't do too well, because it took me 20 years of my organization to win. However, I always found the most exciting stages up to 70 miles on good, open, hilly terrain. So exciting to watch the way they hit those and charged. Yeah, because the longer stages, they start slowly and build up. Yeah, so that's a good distance. Could make a very hard stage.
Are we going to see any cobblestones or gravel sections this year?
Do you know, I honestly haven't read about any, but okay. I stand to be corrected, because I've not heard any comment on bad roads at all.
Okay.
There's certainly, they're in the, well, where they're starting up in the north of France, it's not the area for bad roads.
Right.
They need to be closer to Belgium. Lille, around Lille, and they've got a Lille, there could be some cobbles on that stage. Yeah, there's room for it, because they could tickle the Paris-Roubaix stretch, and they might well do that, which would make it a tricky day start. I must check on that. I actually don't know.
Yeah.
Phil, speaking of the cobblestones, is there any change in the tires or the gear for certain courses like that, or is it, hey, we have a hilly section on this, so we can't really worry about the road for a mile or two?
I need Bob Roll now to tell you all the technical. So they will definitely, if it depends how bad the sections are, but if they've got serious gravel, or they've got quite like the Forest of Arlenberg, bad gravel, they will definitely put the much heavier tire on, thicker tire, 28 across, rather than they normally race on 23 centimeters, but 28 millimeters, 28 tires, big chunky tires. Hopefully they won't puncture. They might use tubeless tires. They're often better for that. And the bike themselves, no, a little bit of padding in their hands and the gloves maybe, because normally on a bad stretch of cobblestones, then they chafe all the hands, and it's okay if it's only Paris-Roubaix, you can heal up in a few days. But if you're riding the next day and the next day, that can be quite a problem.
Phil, you said you used to organize a race and they used to accuse you of the structure of the race for the British riders. What do you think do you think there's any rhyme or reason for the way the Tour is this year, staying in France? Do you think that favors any riders? Do you think that's more for the spectators and to get more viewership? What do you think the logic is that goes behind something like that?
Don't forget, the route is planned at least 2 years in advance. And so the organisation's already told us the starting towns, which is the UK, for 27. And we don't know where it'll go once it crosses the Channel, or will it indeed cross maybe the northeast of England and go over to Holland and restart? You don't know. I don't believe they ever prepared a route for one rider to win it. And when that rider, for example, like Chris Froome or Eddie Merckx in the past, when they're winning regularly, the organisers 2 years on have consciously changed the route ideas to try and beat the strengths of those riders who win too consistently. You know, like Miguel Indurain never won a mountain stage throughout his 5 victories, but he won all the time trials. So they started to present routes that didn't have quite so long distant time trials and maybe a few more mountains. So in that way, they try to break the skill sides of the likely winner. But I don't see anything done here that's going to stop the skill sides of Tadej Pogačar challenging all the way to Paris again. So no, I think the reason they do it, that it is the Tour de France at the end of the day. They go to other countries. Those other countries pay a huge amount of money. This race is highly expensive to run. It doesn't make a profit. They try to. Well, I'm saying it doesn't. It might do. I don't know. I haven't seen the books anymore, but that it is horrendously expensive. The biggest amount of money goes, I would suggest, on the police service and the closure of the roads so completely for hours on time. The man hours of the police services is enormous, and they paid a big rate. It crippled my Tour of Britain in the end because they were charging so much money. The sponsor eventually pulled out, and that was the end of the Tour of Britain. In my race, anyway. There's another Tour of Britain now. But anyway, yeah, that's the way I see it. I think they want to show the French what they've got. And it's only in the last 30 years the French really realize what they've got is the best rolling advert to sell their country and fill it full of tourists. And that's what happens now. That's why we got the chateaus and the beaches. And I throw in a few birds for them to keep them happy up in the mountains. And I get letters still from people who said, do you happen to have the detailed route of the Tour de France? Because we're not going in July, but we want to go 2 weeks after it's finished, because we know the roads they take are gorgeous. And that happens a lot. And it's also very difficult to get the routes of these people, but I do my best.
Phil, you mentioned, we touched on Tadej and the contenders. We mentioned the white jersey.
Yeah.
Who should we be looking at in terms of the green jersey for the sprinters, and who's a key for the polka dots this year?
Polka dots always a little bit of a guess.
Yeah.
Because the guys know that if they can do it right and they've got the strength, they can snatch the polka dot jersey and not feature in the top 10 of the race. I think that's happened recently in the Vuelta, and Fortunato, who won the King of the Mountains in the Giro. He was never a challenge for the race, but he had some great days breaking away for mile after mile and winning the points that mattered. So hats off, he made that his target and took it. And there'll be riders in this race who'll do the same. I really don't know the start list yet, but there'll be guys who will target it. And you know, it's a specialist competition. It came into the Tour de France in the 70s when they started putting a polka dot jersey on you. And you know, we hung a lot of our hats on Robert Miller, who was the first winner of the polka dot jersey of a British cyclist, and I was commentating at the time. And since then, Chris Froome has won it as well. But that was because he was winning the Tour de France and just happened to win the King of the Mountains. So I really haven't got a favour for that race. You can draw that number out of the hat. The guy gets in the right moves, he can win it. The white jersey, well, Lipovic, if he does get the nod to ride, that might be his target because he qualifies. He won the white jersey in the Dauphiné. Pogačar no longer qualifies. Most of the world will say thank heavens because he won it. I think it was 5 years straight. And of course, he's getting older now, and as is Vingegaard. Sprinters, the green jersey, this is a good competition, I've always felt. As you know, it was brought in to stop because the sprinters complained to the organisation back in 1953 when it was first introduced because they could never race for yellow. And so the idea is, what about a competition for us? We can't climb mountains. So they gave them the flat stages and they scored points. And then you get points out on the course. But nowadays, some of the guys, it sort of went a bit pear-shaped when certain riders who weren't great sprinters were very canny riders. They chased the mid-term points and then saved their energy, dropped off after they got those when they hit the mountains, came in nicely fresh, beat the time limit, raced again. And I saw a great battle once between Eric Zabel and the Australian, Stuart O'Grady, and it went down to the last sprint on the Champs-Élysées, the last intermediate sprint. And I remember, because Stuart O'Grady himself told me this tale, I wish I'd known about it at the time. It had been a great competition between the two of them. O'Grady wanted to win the green jersey. There's very few Aussies won it. Only two, I think. Two. Robert McEwen and Baden Cook. Anyway, on the Champs-Élysées, Stuart asked his teammate to go and speak to Zabel. And what he said was, tells Eric Zabel, or ask Eric Zabel if he won't sprint for this intermediate sprint on the Champs-Élysées. Let's make it he who gets ahead of the other on the finishing line at the last stage is going to be the winner. 6 points apart, that's all they were. And the message came back from Zabel. Eric said he has to sprint for his sponsors. And Stuart said, shit, that's what he said. I'm quoting him. And so, of course, Eric got it, and he went on to be the green jersey, because Eric's a pretty nice guy, I know him pretty well, and so Stuart. But that was Stuart telling me a story not so long ago. We were having a bit of a talk about old bygone times, and that was a great story. So the green jerseys always give us good ones. I'd like to see Mathieu van der Poel. He's a pretty good all-rounder, possibility. Wout van Aert, I'm sure, will stick his nose in somewhere. There are plenty of others. Jonathan Milan, a good sprinter, he might look to it. And there are good sprints this year on this course. So it won't be just a race for the mountaineers. And so I reckon if that's the case, then we could see a lot of guys sticking their nose out front, and we could have a very interesting points competition this year.
Rich, do you have anything else for Phil on this year's race?
I have one more. I'm just curious. I think at the beginning, Phil, you mentioned they kind of structure the race so that it finishes at 5 p.m. typically, or right around that time.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean that there's a rolling start time, that it changes stage to stage depending on the terrain and the distance?
Absolutely, it does. They adjust the beginning, and hopefully they've got the timings right, and they'll ride it within the window at the other end. Because some days they have a long neutralized zone. It can be up to 7 miles of neutralized riding. And if you get a problem in the zone, like a flat tire, a foot puncture, or fall, it's not part of the race. So the race must wait for the riders to come back before the race goes. So you can lose time in the neutralized. But they're pretty good pretty accurate. And this year, the previous years, we had record tour average speeds. These guys are going so fast now. And so it's very difficult to get your average speeds right. But so we're coming in normally early rather than late these last couple of tours. 15, 20 minutes ahead of schedule on some of the stages. Of course, I rub my hands in glee. So I'm going to get out at the finishing line that much earlier. I might get to a hotel in time for dinner at 9 o'clock.
Is that true for all of cycling, that they try to schedule races so that they finish around that time in the afternoon?
Yeah, it's done basically for television, initially in France, of course, but nowadays the whole world checks in on that time.
Yep.
I know here in Britain, we always, we're an hour different to Europe. So the Dauphiné here was finishing between 3:30 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. 4:30 and 5 o'clock in France. That's the window they looked at.
Okay, thank you.
Rich, how interesting is it? Because we're used to waking up and watching the Tour de France. And,
Yeah, no, that's what I was thinking, because like like UTMB and a lot of the ultra marathons in Europe, they start at a different time. Like everything here in the United States starts very early, with the idea of getting the roads cleared so everyone can go about their day. Whereas in Europe, they're scheduling the finish so that they can have the maximum amount of people at the finish line when the leaders come through. And it's a totally different experience. Like UTMB starts in the evening so that it finishes during the day, as opposed to like Leadville, which starts at 4 a.m. And then there's like only a handful of people at the finish line when the leaders come in, or, the top 10 people. So it's just an interesting dynamic how they do things differently in Europe.
Well, it's a major sport. It's a
Yeah.
big sport. People go to France in their tens of thousands to watch the sport. They certainly wouldn't watch it if it was coming home at 9 in the morning.
Yeah.
Neither would the riders, I'll tell you. No, it's always been the plan I've always said, to maximize disruption. That's not the reason they do it. But when they went back to when they started finishing on the Champs-Élysées in 75, to close down that road, it's taken them years to negotiate with the police. The Champs-Élysées is the most famous road in Europe, and it has cobbles on it as well. And it only was closed until that point once a year, and that was for the storming of the Bastille celebrations. Well, now it's still the storming of the Bastille celebrations during the Tour, usually the week before the Tour finishes. So all the grandstands are already there. They just move in and put the finishing line down, the barriers, and they lock the centre of Paris up. But they've got it down to a T. Outside of the periphery of the Champs-Élysées and the immediate roads, after that, everything seems to go quite normal. And that's the way it is. Difficult. We are always invited to leave our vehicles on the last day at the hotel if we can. There is an underground car park reserved for the press and the television, because it's very difficult to get you through the barriers in your car, even though you've got the badges, and under the ground and parked up. And so it's a massive organization. But hey, if you're putting on the biggest sporting event annually in the world on a public highway, you've got to finish at the busiest time so you get the viewing public.
Phil, 52 years in, last year was your 51st. Was there anything that happened last year or of recent memory that surprised you, or have you seen it all at this point?
I've never seen it all. I see it in different light sometimes. When I did my 50th, it was a lovely surprise when Christian Prudhomme, the race organizer, sneaked up behind me and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Phil." I said, "Christian." He says, "This is for you." And he gave me a yellow jersey. And he said, "I have never signed in my life a maillot jaune, but I've done it for you." And I thought, that was incredible. So not just did he sign it, but before the stage started, the only other surviving race director of the Tour during my 50 years, Jean-Marie Leblanc, he'd also signed it because he lived in the area where the stage had started. All unbeknown to me. And I was at the finish, of course. So when they got to the finish, they set up this little meeting. And of course, being French, there was a glass of wine or a bottle of beer and some cheese. And Christian wasn't there. I was just shaking hands with the organization. He came up behind me, gave me the maillot jaune. So that was special to me. Maillot jaune is now, if you can see this, I'm going to show you on the wall. Can I do that?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Just, I'll take it.
Yeah.
And there it is. And you can you see the two signatures on it there?
You can.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
awesome.
that's it. Christian
Beautiful.
is camera left and right is John Reardon. So I was very proud, and life goes on. Another birthday next year. Once I start boring the audience, it's time to get off, and that's what I'll do.
So Phil, last time you were on, we did the Final Four with you. We got your answers on some of your questions, but I have some Tour questions if Rich doesn't have any. Especially
Go on.
for you, but the ones I got is, I know you're a busy man. I know you're all business during the Tour de France, but do you have a hotel on the road that you're looking forward to, a meal that you're looking forward to, or a beverage or anything like that?
probably the answer is no to them all. I love our French hotels. I have to say that NBC seek out very nice hotels to their organization that they use in actually live in Brittany, and they're French American, and they look for hotels, knowing after a full day of work, we want to go maybe to a chateau and go, oh my God, look at this, and just sit there and enjoy what is a beautiful building. And there are plenty of beautiful buildings in France. So as long as the hotel is like that, I'm very, very happy. The food is always good in France. I've got no favorite food except fish food. I like shellfish and stuff, crustacean. The wine, yes, but believe me, we are so working such long days, and you can't risk going to bed with a huge hangover. Not that you'll get it with good French wine. So we don't overdrink, to be quite honest, but I do love the wine of France and the beer of Belgium. There's no good wine in Belgium unless they've imported it, you see. Mind you, that reminds me, if I could quickly tell you of another story, very quickly. Many years ago, I got to know Eddie Merckx pretty well. He was the reason I didn't turn pro, because he was winning everything, and I thought, I've got no chance against this guy. So many years later, I was chatting with him. We've become pretty good friends, and he said, Axel, that's his son, Axel Merckx. He says he's married a Canadian, and he's gone to live in Canada. Now I have to go to Canada to see him. He said, why couldn't he have married a Belgian girl? And I said, Eddie, because there are no good-looking Belgian girls. And he goes, what? Oh, I said, apart from your wife, because she was a cracker, and she still is. And happily, they still live together. And that they must be nearly 60 years married now. And she still looks like she did when I used to see Eddie going to the races with her when he was 20 years old.
Amazing. Phil, it was an honor and a pleasure to chat with you, have you back on to break down the tour for us, give us the insights to who's who and what to look for, and everything in between. Safe travels as you go through the 3 weeks, and we are excited to follow the coverage on NBC, and we'll be glued to the television set and tell our friends that there's our friend Phil Liggett.
But you can certainly do that. Thanks very much for giving me the chance to bring back a few memories to me as well, because by talking, you jog the memory, and that's I like that. Because as I do on television, I don't particularly know what I'm going to say till I say it, but that's what I like.
And that's what we love. So we appreciate you. Keep doing what you're doing, and yeah, best of luck and safe travels, and hopefully we'll see you again next year.
Thank you, guys. Let's hope so.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is Phil Liggett with our 2025 Tour de France preview. Make sure you tune in on NBC and Peacock, and follow along with Phil and Bob as they present the route, the riders, and the breakdown of the competition as we go through those 3 weeks. We will be back tomorrow on our regular scheduled time. We'll be going back for New Jersey Wrestling Week this week. We have Anthony Bonaventura from Stevens Institute of Technology joining us tomorrow. And then Chris Noddy from St. John Vianney High School will be with us on Wednesday evening. So enjoy the rest of your Monday. We'll see you tomorrow night. You frozen over there, Jimmy? Yeah, I think he's frozen. Phil, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you. We'll let you get out of here. Jimmy was having some technical difficulties, but yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you.